Very good. You're getting good. So 7 o'clock. Welcome to everyone joining us online, and welcome to everybody for getting here tonight. Is there anyone here tonight that hasn't been here before? First time ever here? A few of you? Good deal. So, first of all, welcome. Second, let us warn you in advance that you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. Primary reason being that we intend for you to have a different experience here. So what we do here, we've been doing for lots of years, we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, as well as behavioral disorders, for any of you who feel like you don't fit in. You just never know. So the other thing I got to do is a matter of housekeeping. If you're members here and you haven't been told yet, your families are welcome to join you here at this meeting. They let you in about 6:15. They can spend the time with you, go through the recovery meeting, and also the recovery church on Saturday. Chaplain Lee officiates that. Same thing. He lets you in about 6:15. He does a service for our unique population of people that have had some difficult starts in life. And so we come together and grow in who we are and whose we are in that instance. And we invite the families to come to that too. And then there's a position of neutrality discussion group on Tuesday nights that many of you members may not know about. But like if you have questions, because I hear people say that sometimes I talk too fast. And they have questions that come up. If they'll go to that, Wayne and Brian and some of the other people that are on staff here will be there to help you. It's Monday. Is it Monday? It's on Monday. If you go Tuesday, you'll be late. So go on Monday at 7? 7. And Wayne and Brian and the crew will help you there. So tonight we're going to take a look at steps 5, 6, and 7. And let's just dive in rather than get crazy talking about what's going to happen. Let's just get it happening. So bear with me. I've got a little bit smaller book tonight, and my eyes are the same age as last week, but the book's smaller. So we're going to be in a chapter entitled Into Action. How many of you in your active addiction discovered, in spite of what you intended, you could not think your way into better action? So one of the things about the program of action, without trying to be cute, is what we've discovered is we have to act our way into better thinking. The mind will catch up if we'll start walking. Does this make sense? So the chapter's called Into Action rather than Into Thinking. Yeah? Okay. So then it goes on to describe where we are in the experience. It says, having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? Question mark. So how many of you have started on your step experience and have made a personal inventory? How many of you knew what to do about it or had someone helping you know what to do about it? Okay. Did you meet them somewhere in a fellowship or someone introduced you and they had been through the process before? That's why a lot of people ask me, what's this thing about sponsorship? I said, well, it could mean any number of things, but in the modern fellowship, it means someone who's been doing this has some experience with the process so they can tell you of their experience with the process in case you want to go through the process. Fair enough? All right, so it says we've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. Now, who's we? The first 100. So what we would want to do is ask ourselves, am I trying to get a new relationship with my Creator? They're telling me what they were trying to do. And if I came here atheist or agnostic, I might want to know, why would I want a new relationship with a Creator I don't believe in? Do I have anyone like that in here? Or started that way? Many of us start that way, okay? So the reason I might want to is what these guys discovered, although half of them were atheists or agnostics to begin with, what they discovered is that the world they lived in didn't cause how they thought and felt, rather it reflected how they were thinking and feeling. And so once you know that your thoughts and emotions are painting the existence in which you live, then it would make sense if I'm struggling in creation, I would want to check in with Creator, straighten out the relationship with Creator. Creation straightens out. That's their witness, right? So even if I don't like theologies, don't like religion, don't like anything else, I have to admit I was struggling a bit in creation. Yeah, because none of us get here on a winning streak, right? Okay, so it says we've admitted certain defects and we've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. So those of you that have done an inventory, did you get some idea what the trouble is? What did you find the trouble was? So you in the way you think, or you personally? So what we want to get you to is it's really not you at all that's the trouble, but the fears that drive the self to manifest that's causing your trouble. Does that make sense? But there's nothing wrong with you. That's one of the things we don't tell you. There's nothing wrong with you. But your thinking may be a little flawed. Yes? Okay. All right. So now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God. So when I say God, what am I talking about? Power. So that's what we'll do tonight. Anytime I say God, you say power, so that if anyone here has prejudice, because all of us are power seekers. Yes? And so they're one and the same thing to us. Right? And those of us that are biblical students, we do not have a spirit of fear, but, right? Power and a sound mind. Yes? Okay. Which most of us aspire to. Yes? Power and a sound mind? Okay. All right. So this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So what was the preceding chapter? How it works. They weren't describing how the power works, because that's above our pay grade. They were describing how the process works that introduces me to the power to me through me. Yeah? Okay? This is perhaps difficult. What's perhaps difficult? The process is perhaps difficult. Anyone ever tell you? No, it's simple. It is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. Okay? Especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. So how many of you would agree with them? Sometimes we think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. How many of us were wrong? How did we learn we were wrong? We had another train wreck. Yeah? Okay. All right. All right. So there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So the reason I wanted you to go back in your experience is there's in actual practice. How does one gain actual practice? I tried it. Now I've tried what they tried, and guess what? Same result. That tells me if I continue to try what they tried, I pretty much guaranteed the same result they ultimately detail, which is we are recovered. But I'm going to make all their mistakes on the way, because although humans can learn from another human being, we are desperately reluctant to do so. We want our own experience. All right. So it goes on to tell us that many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. So are you that guy? Show me, don't tell me. Don't tell me what I need to do. Tell me what you had to do and what you experienced as a result, and then I'll make that decision for myself. Yeah? Okay, so that's what they're going to do for us right now. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So, how many of you came here to overcome drinking or addiction in some form? How many here just rested? Everyone chuckles uneasily. but most of us have had a pass or two at this where we were just resting, whether we knew it or not. Yes? How many of you have been here more than once? Bounced, skipped, got a little magician in you? So if we skip this vital step, we may have a similar experience. Does it make sense? Okay. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. So how many of you have tried to hold on to something you didn't want to tell somebody? Did anyone ever explain to you why that wouldn't work as a program? See, the only way this whole program of getting free of me so I'm free to be me works is to convert what I thought was a waste into something purposeful for another. So if I won't tell this man that loves me enough to listen to all my nonsense when I'm sitting there really tore up from the floor up, then I'm never going to share it with a stranger I met that needs to have a similar experience. So it's preparatory. I gotta practice before I can actually go out and apply. Yeah? So that's why we might want to continue, yes? So then it says, having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. So how many of you have had that experience? Did anyone ever tell you there is no rest of the program? They're conflating fellowship with program. You might get lots of suggestions for what to do in your fellowship experience to get accountability and all those things, but it has nothing to do with program. Program's in the book. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Here are the meetings we attended, or here's the people we met, right? So all of those things might be helpful, but it's not this. And what I agree in the rest of the program, I made a decision in 3 that as long as I had breath in my lungs, if you'll take my obsession to kill myself away, I'll advocate for my brother and sister as long as I got breath. Does that make sense? So there is no rest of the program, and we don't tell people that, and we don't tell people why you're going to want to go show other people what you've been shown. The reason I'm going to want to do that is I need to convert what I thought was a wasted past into a useful tool to avert suffering for others. Yes? Okay. So they took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. They put thought in italics. Why do you imagine they did that? They wanted to call my attention to the fact that a human being cannot think their way into a state of being. Why do I mean in a chapter called Into Action instead of Into Thinking? If I don't act selflessly, even though I know intuitively that I'll gain benefit from it, so it's definitely not selfless, because I know nothing so much ensures immunity as intensive work with others. I know this, so I know when I do it, I expect to ensure immunity, but when I focus on you and how to meet your needs, somehow me gets out of the way. Does that make sense? So I can't think my way into a state of being any more than I can think myself humble. Have you ever thought yourself humble? There went your humility. How many of you have gone out to do something kind for someone less fortunate, then caught a selfie of you doing it? Here's me being selfless. We can't think our way into a state of being. We can only find ourselves in a state of being. Does it make sense? Which is why I may want to pray and meditate and serve. All right, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary. Who's we? They desperately wanted to serve. They had a servant heart, for those of you who know our values around here. So what I find necessary is I've got to be a lot more humble than I can manage. I mean, I have to be in such a state that you notice my humility and call it to my attention, because if I were aware of it, it's not humility, it's an act. Does that make sense? And then humility and fearlessness, well, you can figure it out on your own. How many of you have discovered that we're almost never without fear once we become aware? Okay, until they told someone else all their life story, they put all in italics. Holy mackerel. Sounds like a long inventory, doesn't it? And then a long discussion. How many of you have contemplated, if I have agreed to turn my will and my life over to the care of God that I have now encountered, this power I've now encountered, and I've agreed to do it for a lifetime, I don't even know all my story. I'm still playing out my story. And now my story is enjoined with his story. Yes? Okay. So more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. So they're talking about the sensory experience of the battle within. How many of you have a persona that you would like to be viewed as? And then you've got a reality within you saying you ain't that. And it tears at you. So it does produce a storm within us, doesn't it? Okay. So the inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. So how many of you have had sprees? My meth addicts had. Not past tense. Coming to his senses, he's revolted. At certain episodes, he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they'll never see the light of day. Where's the power found? Deep down inside. Do you relate to them having these horrible memories of you manifesting a different self that you didn't barely recognize, but anyone know what they're talking about? And now I'm pushing that down inside of me. In the only place this power can be found, I'm piling garbage on the light. Any relate to that? Okay. So he's under constant fear and tension. How many of you can relate to that? The doctor had an opinion about alcoholics. He said that we are restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can once again experience that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks which we see other people taking with impunity, right? And so the authors knew that about us, and so they never suggested abstinence as a program of recovery. They suggested I switch my dependence and then improve conscious contact so I can move. My source of ease and comfort comes from within. I'm inebriated in the spirit a higher percentage of the time. And when I really feel like I need inebriation, I go serve another. Right? How many of you have heard people's fifth steps and just got blasted with the Spirit? You can be having a real shit sandwich of a day, and all of a sudden it's all good, right? Okay. All right, so psychologists are inclined to agree with us. How many of you had some psychologists that you visited along the way? Come on, in this population, all of you had psychologists assigned to your case. You may not have met them, but they made notes in your... Anyway, never mind. So, they're going to tell you about them. Did you spend a lot of money seeing professional help? Did you? Or did you spend the insurance company's money or somebody's money? So, he said, we've spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We've seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. You relate to that? You know why we don't share opinions in 12-step recovery? Because we're people as a class who have paid thousands of dollars for informed medical opinions, lied to get those opinions, and then ignored the results of those opinions. We don't respond well to advice. We only respond to experience. True? All right, so unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance for recovery. How many of you have discovered that? Where's my prescription addicts? They have a very low opinion of us, don't they? None of you? Went to them to find a new drug dealer, and told them your symptoms so that you could told them the ones that upset your stomach. Oh, I can't take that. It's got Tylenol in it. I think it's Dilaudid. I do. That worked really well on my last toothache. Apparently, more of you than want to cop to it, right? So we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in the world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. So rightly and naturally. So how many of you had a little struggle with who to ask to help you with your story? A lot of people do, and you will, because it's a big deal. How many of you, when you really did hear who or meet who you wanted to hear your story, were still a little afraid to ask them? It wasn't because you knew you were going to have to divulge something to them that you didn't want them to know about you, because you didn't want them to find out something about you, because you thought maybe somebody actually likes me now, and now I'm going to tell them this, and it's going to... The only reason I can detail that experience is there's not one of us ever done a fifth step, didn't have something we didn't want to share with someone who finally was showing us some love. And I'm telling you, you're not alone. And I'm also telling you, this whole idea of don't be afraid is silly. I know you're afraid, but what I am telling you, we'll never know non-judgment that the Creator intends for you until you share that thing you can't utter without tears with somebody who can walk you through that pain and into your deliverance. Yeah? So those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course will, want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. So those of you who have a religious tradition which requires confession, we've always had those folks among us. And if you need to go to confession, by all means go to confession, but they're going to give us some further information in case, because our inventory that we're preparing a testimony for a lifetime, so it's more than absolution I seek, if that makes sense. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. How many of you wanted to do that? In this crowd, probably more than a few, right? I mean, because if I have pending charges, it's protected by the confessional. So anyone I work with that may have pending charges, I would assume they would want to do this. It doesn't matter. This idea that I need to know what's going on with them is silly. I already know what's going on with them. They wouldn't have found me if they weren't supposed to receive a healing. I know everything about them that I need to know by the signature of their spirit when they come upon me. I know who they are and whose they are, and now my job is to wake them up. That's it. Does that make sense? All right, so we often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. So if I go to a pastor, they're quick to see and understand our problem. What is my problem? If they don't understand alcoholism, they may think that my problem is drinking, but drinking is a symptom of my problem. If I go to somebody and they think that drugs are my problem, then they won't understand that with or without drugs, my problem exists. And then I can't exist because of my problem without drugs because it's untenable. Yes? So they may not know that if they don't know that. And so then it goes on to say, of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. So how many of you have encountered people who do not understand alcoholics? How many of you have been surprised by where you encountered them? How many of you have encountered them in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous? How many of you have encountered them in your own thought life? Any of you have been unforgiving towards yourself or others? Perhaps you don't understand alcoholics. We're baffling creatures, us alcoholics. A little bit of magician in us. Some of you other disappearing act folks. Okay. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouth, understanding friend. So those of you that are starting to help others, That's what you're trying to grow into. If you're on the path, you're trying to grow into a closed-mouth, understanding friend. How many of you, as you started in this manner of living, know yourself now to have not been terribly closed-mouth or understanding? The more people you work with, the more of your old ideas you have to confront. And so you never see anyone that isn't you. One creator, one creation. So all your judgments is blinding your vision. Does it make sense? And until we start to recognize the human condition for what it is and offer compassion and healing to other people in the human condition, our healing that we desperately need doesn't come. The minute we offer it to another, it has to come. I can't transmit what I don't have. It comes right through me. Make sense? Okay. So perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be that one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. So understand what? Unaffected by what? Understand that I am in the search for the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, but the truth. I'm in the search for the truth, deep down inside. Does that make sense? And if I understand that, I understand that in the way of the truth may be many facts about someone else's truth or my truth, because I've assigned a meaning to all kinds of difficult experiences I've had or what have you, yes? But what we learn here, I've heard Chap give the sermon, once we collect the facts and we take them to the truth, then we're new. Does that make sense? So, it says that we got to understand that they're in their search for the truth, and then I'm unaffected by that truth. So if you're working with someone who you just cannot tolerate the kinds of things they've gone through, then you're not the right one to hear it. Make sense? All right, so notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be that one is so situated there is no suitable person available. Do you think that's true in Phoenix, Arizona today? It may be if you're incarcerated. If you're locked up in county and there's no place to safely put anything away, and it may be any number of other ways. If you are so frightened of what you have that you can't write it down, I need to respect that. There are ways, if there's no one suitable to hear your story, there's nothing we can do. But if someone's suitable to hear your story, but you don't want to write it down, well, they could write it down, or you could tell your story. There's parts of stories I hear that we don't write down because there are no statute of limitations on the shit I'm about to hear. I ain't joking, but it's what we do here. If that is so, this step may be postponed only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through it at our first opportunity. The assumption is we've had a tangible encounter in two. So when I'm holding myself in complete readiness, that's a sensory experience. When you say, move, God, I'm going. Does that make sense? Okay. So we say this because we're very anxious that we talk to the right person. How many of you know what they're talking about? You held on to your story, and then you met the person, and you just knew that's the person. I'm going to tell the story. Okay? It's important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we're driving at, and that he will not try and change our plan, but we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. That makes sense? That's who I'm looking for, and that's who I'm trying to grow into. Because the truth is, how many of you, taking somebody through their steps, heard of a plan they had that was disturbing to you? It's none of my business. I just had this conversation with Skylar today. Sometimes we have a difficult conversation. Man, if you've made up your mind, go forth and prosper. If you don't die, look me up. I know it sounds callous, but dude, we're not here to wrestle with the drug and its pull. All right, so when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. So that'll tell you, whoever you're about to work with, if they're ready, they're going to come to you right away. And if you're ready, you'll know, you'll waste no time. You'll find yourself, how many of you have had that experience? You found yourself saying things you didn't think you'd ever say? Okay. So it says we have a written inventory and we're prepared for a long talk. So you'll know that you are ready if you have a written inventory and you're prepared. And if you don't have a written inventory, let me just tell you, there's no reason you should know how to do a written inventory if you've never been shown how. So a lot of people go, well, they told me to get a written inventory and come see them. That was about 7 years ago. If you haven't been shown, sit down with one of us that's done one or 2 or 300, and we'll show you how we do it. It's not rocket science, but if you've never been shown, you aren't going to know. There's no reason you should know how to do something you've never done, right? Okay, so we explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. Now, do you think the first time you ever went through a step experience, you could have explained to your partner what you were about to do or why you had to do it? Likelihood is no, right? So clearly at this point, they're talking to the person taking someone through the step. I'm supposed to be armed with the facts about myself. I'm supposed to have experience in the process. I'm supposed to be able to tell them what I'm about to do with them because I'm seeking my spiritual experience too, right? The step doesn't say, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I now go out and anoint people with spiritual awakenings. It's above my pay grade. I'm always seeking my spiritual awakening. I'm hoping for yours. But I'm not responsible for yours. I'll get yours regardless. If you get yours, I'll get mine as long as I honestly want to and I'm willing to make the effort. Make sense? All right, so most people approached in this, we explained to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They'll be honored by our confidence. So how many of you, when you've been asked to help, were honored? So for those of you who are afraid to ask somebody, why would you deny another human being that honor? So don't let your ego get in the way. I mean, I understand sometimes the Spirit's holding you back. I'm not saying that. But if it's just, I don't want to bother them, that kind of stuff, you're not bothering someone in the Spirit to help you grow spiritually, ever. And if they're bothered by it, it ain't the one. Okay? So we pocket our pride and go to it. Well, they paint a mental image, don't they? What do they mean, pocket our pride? How many of you have done a fifth step? Did you have some stuff in your mind that you really didn't want to say? You weren't really sure if you were going to say it? I need to own that, right? And I need to get that voice that's telling me they're not going to like you when you tell them that. I need all that and put it in my pocket and see what's up. It says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. So promise and condition. What was the promise? We are delighted. How many of you got through a fifth step and someone showed you this promise? How many of you didn't even know you were delighted, but all of a sudden you felt less burdened, but they somehow looked delighted? How many of you were not delighted? What was the condition? Taking this step withholding nothing. How many of you tried to hold something back? Any of you? Did they know? How the fuck did they know? How many of you have heard them before and know? See, it's a sensory experience. So we're going to know that you're carrying a burden, you're holding a burden all the way through the burden. When you let go, we're going to get a flow of the Spirit. And so if you're holding back, you're holding my hit. And I have always known when you some bitches are holding my hit. Right? Who's heard fifth steps and knows what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's definite. Okay. So here we go. We can look the world in the eye, another promise. How many of you got past that one thing you didn't want to say and got it out, and they looked at you and just, is that it? We good? Did you put it back in the barn when you were done? Whatever. Not everybody was exotic, Jeff. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. How many of you had that experience? Maybe for the first time ever, you felt like you at least were at a place where you could rest. Our fears fall from us, and we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Now they're talking to us about the tangible sensory experience that we call God. Not a concept, not a group of drunks, not a light bulb, not a doorknob, none of the silly things we've ever heard. We feel the nearness of our Creator because we're feeling the power flow in and through us. Yeah? And then it says, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. So they're separating the idea of what I believe from what I'm experiencing, because my experience will change my mind. Right? They promised us that. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. That's a promise and a warning. How many of you got through a fifth step? Whew, I'm good. Peace out. And then still struggled? How many of you forgot there was a few more steps after 5? Because a lot of times we don't go into the amends step for whatever reason, and we never get into actually serving and showing others, which is the big amends, until we develop some spiritual fitness, right? I won't be able to go into that addict scene, that alcoholic scene, without judgment until I've actually grown spiritually to a point that I can simply see them in their deplorable state and see them past that into their recovered state. Because I'm going to speak to the recovered one no matter how bad they look. That's what had to be done for me. I've told you guys about my kid, right? Some of you guys knew Joey on the yard, but before he went down the last time, he was strung out on heroin, and he was trying to get right. And I went over and saw him at his mother's house, and he just was shaken and sick and crying, and he was all full of self-condemnation. And I finally just laid down with him on the bed, and I said, Joe, I'm going to stay with you, and I'm going to pray with you, because you're a child of God, not an addict, not a junkie, not a convict. You're a child of the living God, and I will stay with you, and I will pray with you until you know it and show it. And he has since gotten 2 college degrees, and Denise and I got to go watch him get his diplomas, and he's now out of prison again, and he's making an effort to reunite with his family. So you see, we spoke to that man, not the one in the deplorable condition. So then, it says we feel that we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. So what's that look like? Sounds a little weird, doesn't it? But how many of you felt like you're on a tightrope all your life? Like you just couldn't misstep? Any of you? Any perfectionists here? Come on, I don't believe you. So now we're painting a different picture, right? Everything's permissible, not everything's beneficial, but I'm on a broad highway. I'm going to go out and take this power out for a walk and see how it goes. Yeah? Okay. So returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. That's pretty specific, right? Why do they say that so specific? I've done a lot of heavy work by this time, and now I need to go reflect and make sure that everything is in place. Yeah? All right? So we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Why do I know Him better? Because I just shifted from belief to experience. I just felt the flow of the Spirit. Hopefully the person with me pointed out to me, that's the power we call God. So I'm no longer conceptual. I'm experiential. I'm talking to the one who animates me. Yes? The first honest prayer ever said. The one who redeemed me in the middle of my redemption. Yes? Okay. So taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. So we're going to have to go to that. Page 58 here in a minute. Yeah? Is it 59? I always say 58 just to piss Sean off. He's not here. Okay, so someone tell me I'm doing it wrong, please. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we've omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? So obviously those are the questions as I go into this contemplative period. Is this the way I want the story told, and is this the whole story up to now? Yes? Are the stones properly in place? What stones have they talked to me about up to now? Mostly a cornerstone of willingness, right? Many of you Bible students and know who the cornerstone is? Have we skimped on the cement and put it into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? So am I spinning my story a little bit to sound less? Any of you spin it? To sound a little more heroic or a little less shitty, or we do that. I mean, I'm dumping some garbage. Let me just amp it up a little. So I want to know that because I'm about to go into a contemplative process, yeah? So I got to go to the first 5 proposals. So I got to go back to page 59. And the first proposal is that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Powerless when? Always. Good answer. Powerless when I'm drinking because of this phenomenon of craving that develops. Yeah? I'm energized by the sedative alcohol and I just keep going for more. When I'm not drinking, I'm restless, irritable, and discontented, and I'm on a quest for ease and comfort. Yeah? Okay? And then it says, that our lives have become unmanageable. How many of you thought your life had become unmanageable because you did a little more meth than you had intended? A lot of us take this step thinking that our life is unmanageable because of addiction, but the addiction was simply a reflection of the unmanageability within me, which they didn't bother to tell me till 2. Right? So let's look at what they told us about that in 2, and we agnostics. Page 52, is that right? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. Any of you discover trouble with personal relationships? How many of you decided people were the problem and isolated off by yourself? How many of you still had trouble with personal relationships? That's when we proved to ourselves the main problem centers in the mind, because it had nothing to do with the people surrounding me. It had to do with what was going on within me. Yes? So then it says we couldn't control our emotional natures. How many of you have had that experience? How many of you have learned that we're not designed to control our emotional nature? The reason we want to improve consciousness is because when I'm conscious, when I'm awake, I know I'm not my emotion. I can experience my emotion, I can share with emotion, but I'm not that emotion. I'm never supposed to control my emotion. It's used to bear witness powerfully to you. Yes? I don't know if I can. It says we were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. Couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's really a thing. How many of you, no matter how bad you got, always wanted to be helpful? As soon as somebody said they needed something, no matter how screwed up we were, I got you, bro. I got some suggestions for you. Okay, so that's my human condition. And so a solution to that would be a good thing, yeah? All right, so now we're back to 59 again. And came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So you might want to ask yourself, what do the authors describe as insanity? Because it's not silly things we hear in fellowship. How many of you know, right, intuitively, it's doing the same thing, expecting a different result? That's not what the author said. And how many of you in active addiction did the same thing with no expectation of a different result? This is going to suck, watch. So what they said, the authors said, this alcoholic insanity is an appalling lack of perspective. It's characterized by the inability to think clearly. That fit us? Okay. And it said this power could restore us to sanity. So insanity is that inability to think clearly, this appalling lack of perspective. So sanity would be a perspective, a better perspective, and the ability to think clearly, which is why they say think, think, think on a lot of recovery walls, right? And where are we finding this power? Deep down within us. And how do we recognize it? Right. They said as soon as they recognized the power and it took a certain attitude toward that power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowed into them. So now I've found the well of ease and comfort. So now I don't have to go out in the world to look for my ease and comfort. I can get it from within. Handy little trick for an addict of the hopeless variety to know. Yes? Okay, so now we know where we're going, how we're going to recognize it, and what are the symptoms of me being restored, right? Being restored to sanity. I'm thinking clearer, right? So by 5, I've already been able to be alone at perfect peace and ease, right? They're already showing me sanity's coming instantaneously after my encounter if I'm paying attention. Yes? Okay. It says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Now, over the years, people have said a God of my understanding. That is not what they said. God of your understanding, you're still in the main problem. But they said a God of, as they understood him, which is not a God of even their understanding. It was a God they experienced. Bill talks about it in his story. He knew Ebby couldn't be sober, but there he sat across the table. There was a miracle sitting right across the table from me. He shouted great tidings. And then he talking about his thinking of his grandfather and all those things. And anyway, emotion welled up within him and made him swallow hard. He got moved in the spirit. So what he then declared is that long last I saw, I felt, and then I believed, which is why the authors focused on electrical theory. None of us can fully define or comprehend electrical theory, but all of us have experienced it. Stick a fork in the fucking socket. We have experienced its effects. And no one expects you to believe in God without experiencing the effects, and we're going to call your attention to those effects as we grow in spirit together. Make sense? And then step 4 says we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, and then we're back to 5. So now we're back on the page 76, and it says if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. Answer what to our satisfaction? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Have we skimped on the cement, put it... So this is my opportunity, my hour's up now, to get back with whoever I'm telling my story to and say, yeah, that one little thing, here's what it is. Right? How many of you got through all this, didn't hold anything back, still weren't delighted? It happens, and if that's you and you just don't want to admit to it, how many of you don't understand the meaning of powerless? It almost sounds like an excuse, doesn't it? Fair point. So what we need to understand is I'm powerless, meaning all that gnarly crap that I did that I barely recognize, it was me, but it was a dead me. And I'm powerless to change that, but I'm still clinging to that. Instead of clinging to the suffering I can avert for you, properly armed with the facts about me. Does that make sense? So a lot of times it's because we're not moving forward in the step process. The minute you start applying what you've been shown to help somebody else, you will start to outgrow these things. So do not stop in 5 if you don't get the experience of delight. You may have to take someone else through there too to experience your delight. Make sense? Okay. So then it says we've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Now they're going to talk to us about some of the silly concepts we hear in fellowship about willingness. How many of you were told, you're just not willing? Get a year and I'll work with you. You ever hear any of you stumblers like me? Like, you silly motherfucker. If I could get a year, I wouldn't need you. Go talk to somebody else. You're wasting my valuable high time. Any of you had that experience? Yeah, these people are obnoxious. It's time to get high. All right. So willingness is indispensable, but willingness is not of me, though it flows through me. And this is what these people tell us, that I need a change, but I can't bring about the change. Powerlessness is my issue, and access to power would be my solution. And so I'm going to need to ask for this willingness that is indispensable in order to grow. Yeah? So it says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? So that's another question. When they ask a question, they want you to ask yourself that question. Go inward, right? Eyesight without insight, spiritual blindness. You're going to have to get cleared up. So am I now ready to let go of them? If I'm honest, I'm not ready to let go of everyone. I don't even consider a lot of the things about me character defects. So you relate to me. I haven't taken this power out for a walk, and so I haven't applied it yet. I can tell you, when I was working in a day center for seriously mentally ill people, and I was given a talk, facilitating a talk, and I started, because I find myself quite witty, I was being humorous. And they came up to me, a couple of them came up to me afterward and said, "Joe, why were you making fun of us?" And I was just crushed, because I wasn't intending to make fun of them, but they didn't have the mental capacity to interpret my humor. So what I thought was an asset was misapplied at best. Does it make sense? So am I ready to have God remove them all? Eventually, but not all at once, right? So I'm going to get into some kind of a priority setting thing. I've got a list of harms I've done. Some of the things I'm willing to amend right now, to the wife, to the family, to the employer, and some things I'm not quite ready to do that might have more serious consequences. Yes? Okay. And then it says, can he now take them all, every one? So they're up in the ante. And you guys got to get this. We're about to get into a prayer. Step 3, there is no amen. No matter how many times people will hand you the card, and there's a reason for that. That's just a prayer of faith, and it's only half the prayer. I'm not expected to move into something that I haven't had my eyes open to. So by the time I say the 7th step prayer, I better have made sure I'm ready to go through with the amends process and all the things that's going to entail, because now there is an amen. I'm asking for agreement. Does that make sense? And now I've got no more excuses. I see the harms I've done. I see what myself has manifested into. I see the part I played in all of that. And now I've got to go out and amend it. And it's going to take some serious power. And the ante just went up. Yeah, God, serious God. Better not be a chair, a light bulb, or a group of fucking drunks. Better go in and through me. Yeah? All right, so then it says, if we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Now they're telling you, if you won't do something, ask for willingness until it comes, and do what else you will do, because you're going to act your way into better thinking. And when you start working with others, they're going to, if you're working with somebody who goes and self-surrenders for something they've done, and all of a sudden you've got some little chicken shit thing you're afraid to do, you'll see that act of courage, and so that you won't be a hypocrite, you'll go take care of your shit. True? Same way that we do our evening review with them, right? I got guys to this day text me every night, tell me their evening review. You know what I know? I know that I'm going to review their day and share a little bit of my day with them. I know I'll get mine done as long as someone gets a hold of me. Just giving you some tricks in case you... Okay. So when ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. So how many of you, as you went through your inventory, did discover, remember, it was a fearless and searching moral inventory, not an immoral. If all you got out of there was garbage, you didn't dig far enough. Because I was looking for the great reality. I was looking for who I am and whose I am. And then all those other layers, that was myself manifested in various ways which had defeated me. Okay, so I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. So how many of you have discovered that things you thought were useful were less useful than you thought, and things you didn't think terribly useful had a lot more use than you thought? Again, we don't know our old ideas till we start serving. Then it says, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. So now I'm asking for agreement. I know what it looks like. The only thing I would say to you, if you wrote your own third step prayer because you don't talk in King James language, do the same thing with 7. These are suggestive prayers. If you do not talk in King James language, talk to God the way you talk to God, because God knows how you talk. You're not going to surprise God and say, hey, Papa, can you help a motherfucker out? I got shit to do. Because he knows that you talk that way. So that's it, guys. Next week we're